Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Hello. Welcome back. We didn't know who was going to start this episode.
Long pause.
We just stared at each other until one of us started talking. I feel like the listeners, like the beginning of our episodes have to be the most uncoordinated thing because we generally don't have like a way we just start every time, and sometimes we just hit the record button and we just go into it, and so sometimes they get 5 minutes of a random conversation. And like our last topic, the last episode we recorded, I asked Kim a question and she started answering it, and that just became the topic we recorded about. We didn't even get to what we had talked about recording about that day.
Welcome to our friendship. Actually, in our defense, I would like to say, if you listen to the first year of our podcast,
please don't.
No, please do.
Okay.
Absolutely, we had good intro. So we had an intro, and then we had a very organized way to start the podcast.
That's true.
We did.
Yeah.
And then we said, screw that noise. We're going to do what we want.
Yeah. We did daily market updates for the first year. And so we would share what our favorite cryptos were doing, what the biggest movers were. We had a very defined way of starting. And now it's a little bit more free flow.
It is.
It's not a bad thing, but you can definitely tell it's a little bit more free flow.
Maybe season 4. You know what, Josh, if we set our intentions right now, maybe season 4, we can just have it. We'll have the beginning. So like set and organized. If we set the intention.
That's true.
Okay. Well, what are we talking about today, Josh?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about refining and bringing the gold out of a situation. So we've talked a little bit about this in like our discussions on hell and just in general, like how like fire refines you and it brings out this gold. And in this moment, I'm going to use gold and revelation kind of similarly. And so like I think about when I went through a challenging moment of life a few years ago, I actually gleaned a lot of gold, a lot of revelation from that fairly easily. Like it was coming with some regularity because there was so much fire, there was so much pressure that I was just aware that I was in that, then I was experiencing that. And it just seemed like stuff was coming to the surface way more often than sometimes when that pressure's not there. And I wondered if you've ever experienced something like that.
I mean, I think so. I think there have been times in my life where, yeah, it's really trying, but yeah, the clarity comes really quickly. But I've also been in times where, yeah, it's really trying and it doesn't come so quickly.
Yeah.
So, but I also wonder how much of that is dependent upon my submitting to the process and my resisting the process.
Sure.
And let me just be clear. I am not suggesting that God hurts us to teach us a lesson, but I do think there are trials, and a lot of times there's suffering in the human condition that comes with some of those trials, that can in turn help us grow and even give us an experience that will then help others down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you even look at the example of Job. Like he was like the favorite, right? He's the guy that God was really for, and yet he allowed him to go through this suffering and these really hard trials. But how much have thousands, millions, billions of people learned from that?
Right.
You know, I don't know. What do you think?
Part of my thought with this is I've noticed this in my life that when there's pressure, I'm more aware of what's coming from it than moments that just feel easy. Like moments that feel really easy, sometimes it can be really challenging. Like, not challenging. I have to be very intentional in order to pull gold out of a moment that feels really calm.
Yeah.
Not that there's not gold there and not that it's not accessible, but personally I have to be way more intentional about like, okay, like there's nothing pressing me at the moment. So it's not that I need to create the pressing myself, but like instead of the gold coming to the surface, I have to mine the gold. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I think it does make sense. Now, have you found this in intentional times of pressure or times of pressure that you found yourself within? So, like, if you do a really hard workout, you're subjecting yourself to this, you're putting yourself like in that position of having some big pressure and stuff. You know what I mean? And then mining it out of that, which I actually don't think is bad. Like, I don't think that's a bad way. But is that kind of what you're talking about? Or are you talking about just as it comes when it's harder times or when there's more pressure?
Yeah, I think what I meant was moments that I've found myself in, where when I've just found myself in a moment that had more pressure, I was a bit more aware of what was coming from it. Putting myself into it could be a way of creating that gold. Like that's a big part of like physical fitness, or like people who do like cold water exposure, like they're intentionally putting themselves through a stressful moment so that they can reap the reward from it. So I do think it's possible to do that. But I think in my mind, what I was specifically talking about was just moments that I found myself doing. I found myself in something that was hard. And then it was like, if I looked, all of a sudden I start seeing all this golden revelation and like purpose in the pain, like purpose in the hard moment. And that I think is such an important thing to have, because that perspective on, oh, this is for something, like that totally has the ability to shift that moment to where you like to where it gives you different perspective, and all of a sudden it's not quite as challenging to walk through, because it's like, man, this sucks, but at least I know there's like a really good, like there's something's going on here and it's for a reason.
Sure. Have you found yourself able to get to that realization while in the midst of the muck? Or is it on like a front end or a tail end?
Yeah, definitely not towards the front end, but toward like especially the situation that I had a few years ago. Like it wasn't towards the front end, but towards towards the middle, towards the end. Like it was like, oh, like I'm starting to see all sorts of purpose and reason in this, and it's helpful.
And that situation was a long suffering situation.
Yeah,
It's not like
it was a while.
It wasn't a 15 minutes of hard cardio.
Right.
Like this was ongoing. And so you
Yes.
almost had to be able to acclimate, don't you think? Like somehow acclimate to survive
Yeah, I do.
this position of pressure.
Right.
And I wonder some of the purpose in that, like even though it probably didn't feel like it at the time, do you think some of it was allowed with you because he knew you would be able to turn and get the gold out of it and not
Oh,
just be crushed by it?
oh, I think without a doubt that there was purpose in it. And um, like we talked about, when we've talked about, oh, you're going through a refining process, like the quicker you let go of the things um, that aren't yours to hold on to, whether it's an identity or a purpose or whatever it is, the quicker you let go of what you're not supposed to hold on to, the easier it is um, to go through that process. And I think also with that same thought, like the quicker you are able to find meaning in the suffering, the easier it can be to be like, oh, okay, like this isn't just mindless suffering.
Mm.
Like there is a reason that we're going through this.
Do you think having that mindfulness, like that realization of, oh, this is intentional, there's purpose in this, does
Mm-hmm.
that ease the pressure at all? Like, does that lessen the hardship of it because you know that there's purpose?
I'm torn between that answer because
Okay. Give me
I,
both sides. Like,
well, I feel like um, in order to really mine it, the pressure still, or to get it out, the pressure still needs to be there. And so, is it actually easier to walk through knowing that there's a reward on the other side? I don't know if it's easier, but maybe, like, I don't know if it's physically easier, but maybe it's mentally easier.
yeah, yeah, that would make sense. I think about, I'm a mom. I gave birth naturally to my children.
Mm,
And there's a lot of pain and suffering that happens in that. Some people are able to like completely harness that, and it's a beautiful thing. For
yeah.
me, there was a lot of pain and suffering in that. However, I knew there was an end in sight, and I knew there was a reward at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I know it was coming when it started happening. I mean, you never you don't actually know what to expect until you like go through it. But there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of pressure, and it was as much mental as it was physical.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, and I probably am just not as like well adjusted as a lot of people in that, but just being real.
Mm,
um but if I was faced with that kind of pain and like, I wouldn't call it anguish, but there's a mental part of it, right?
mm-hmm.
Without knowing that there is a reward at the end or that there is an end in sight, I think I would probably handle it much differently.
For sure.
I would probably sit in the suffering a whole lot more
Yeah.
than going, okay, we're almost there. We can do this. We're going to
Yeah.
get through it.
Well, it can be a tough thing to go up to someone who's suffering and say, hey, do you know there's a reason why this is happening? And you can choose to feel it differently. Like that can be like, it can, like, that can be like a super offensive thing, even though it's totally true. Like
Right.
in the moment, if you change your perspective on the suffering, it will be a different process for you to walk through it. But like that's also like such an offensive thing, can be an offensive thing to say to someone in the moment of suffering.
That's true. I
So
mean,
I do think I think yeah, whether it's childbirth, whether it's just life, whether it's going to the gym, is it physically easier to go through? I don't know if it's physically easier, but mentally, if you can change your perspective on it, if you can find the purpose, if you can find the goal sooner, and keep that as like the Bible talks about Jesus endured the cross because of the goal set before him. And it was like he knew this will be worth it no matter like the like the cross is like um the worst thing you could possibly dream up, but he was able to do it because he knew there was purpose and meaning in it. And I think that's where I sit with some of this is like, if I can see, the quicker I can find the meaning for it, the quicker I can um like keep walking towards it, even if it's excruciating to walk towards it.
that's interesting. Do you think at any point the walking towards it is no longer excruciating if you can get your head wrapped around it a little bit? I only ask this because of like coal walking or like fire walking
Yeah.
that people do. It's a mental thing. It is not a physical thing.
Yeah.
It is fully mental. And I
Yeah.
just wonder, I don't actually know. I've not done that. But I do wonder, like, is there a point in which it can actually mm, lessen the physical agony by simply being really rooted and determined mentally?
I think yes. Um, I think yes, but I've not experienced that.
Fair. Very,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. I do fully believe, I believe mentally that we have the power to change how we feel by believing something different. And I've also not walked in that in a very tangible way.
Hmm.
And so at least not consistently. And so so I do think that it's totally possible to go through a situation that might be excruciating, but because of your belief about it, it's not at all. I do think that that is totally possible. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't know. Yeah, I've not fully been there yet.
I also wonder, I'm sorry, I have all the questions. I also
Yeah.
wonder, can you fully experience the agony and the excruciating part of it while also fully being positioned and knowing that there's purpose and knowing that there's more? Like, can you hold both of like,
Mm,
I really am okay. I can be centered in this. I'm looking for the gold. There's purpose. The Lord has me. You know what I mean? Like, I
yeah.
am strong. I am getting through this while still absolutely being in it and feeling every bit of it.
Yeah. I do think I do think all these things are possible ways. Like I think the human body is so incredibly powerful and capable.
Yeah,
Um, and I think we're just starting to learn the technology that is the human body and what's capable from it. Um, and I know we're not there yet, but I know we're learning it. And I think what the human body is capable of is astounding.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to completely agree.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good talk. I think the for me it's like for me this topic is just like uh, it kind of came up because I was um, processing like moments that have been really hard and moments that have been easy, and how do you keep growing when it's easy? And I think it just requires that intentionality. And maybe in some ways, like continuing to allow yourself to be tested.
That's interesting. That brings up a whole other topic in my brain that we may have to talk about another time.
Sounds good.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Thanks for listening, you guys. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.